Have you ever encountered a story so raw, so profoundly shocking that it makes your heart clench? A tale of unimaginable betrayal, one that rips apart the very essence of love and leaves you gasping for air. Picture this: a young wife, expectant with her first child, utterly terrified as she's cruelly cast out onto the unforgiving streets by the man who had solemnly sworn to be her protector. Now, visualize that same man, a celebrated billionaire tycoon, a darling of the media, facing judgment in a courtroom swarming with eager reporters and doubtful onlookers. This narrative delves far beyond broken promises. It's an exploration of staggering truths, of emotions shattered beyond repair, in an unyielding fight for justice against seemingly insurmountable odds. Are you prepared to witness the dramatic unraveling of a contemporary giant? Amelia Hayes wasn't born with a silver spoon in her mouth. In fact, she grew up in a modest, hard-working neighborhood on the outskirts of Boston. Her father, a skilled carpenter, and her mother, a dedicated school teacher, toiled tirelessly to provide for their family, instilling in Amelia the enduring values of perseverance and empathy. Amelia spent her childhood days lost in the pages of books at the local library, dreaming of a future filled with genuine love and unwavering stability. She often found herself wondering if the fairy tale she so eagerly devoured held even a sliver of truth, that somewhere out in the vast world, a prince was waiting to sweep her off her feet. At 25, she believed she'd found that prince in Ethan Sterling, though few outside his exclusive circles knew his real name at the time. He was famously reclusive, cultivating a near-mythical status among venture capitalists. Newspapers and magazines often identified him as a brilliant maverick, confidently following in the formidable footsteps of visionary moguls like Elon Musk and Bill Gates. Ethan, however, seemed different, quieter, more introspective, yet he commanded a presence that effortlessly filled any room he entered. Their whirlwind romance began when Amelia was invited to a lavish charity gala by a well-meaning friend who thought she needed some excitement in her life. She had never stepped foot into such an opulent venue before. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceilings, gold-lined pillars soared towards ornate frescoes, and a sophisticated hum of classical music swirled through the glittering background. Ethan spotted Amelia in a quiet corner, nursing a glass of sparkling water, perhaps looking a little overwhelmed. His first words to her were disarmingly simple: "I'm Ethan. You look like you're about to run for the door." A short, hesitant conversation blossomed into an hour, then two. He was unlike anyone Amelia had ever met, polished, articulate, and impossibly wealthy. Yet, it was his unexpected vulnerability that truly drew her in. He spoke with passion about his big dreams, of building a tech empire that would reshape global commerce, revolutionizing e-commerce platforms, AI, real estate, you name it. But he also confessed to a relentless, gnawing loneliness, a heavy burden that came with the kind of astronomical success that often turned friends into opportunists and family into distant, cautious acquaintances. Their courtship was astonishingly rapid. Within months, Ethan proposed in front of a small, intimate gathering at a breathtaking beach house in Malibu. The sky had blushed with the soft pastel hues of pink and orange as he knelt on one knee, the ocean waves providing a gentle soundtrack. Though they'd been together for only a short while, a period that felt like a lifetime compressed into weeks, she accepted. The ring was an undeniable symbol of his immense wealth, a flawless diamond that sparkled like a captive star. But Amelia told herself, and truly believed, it was the man, not the money, that had captured her heart. They married quietly. No prying eyes, no paparazzi frenzy, just a simple, elegant ceremony held in Ethan's meticulously manicured garden, where he promised her a life of comfort, unwavering love, and true partnership. He insisted that their union was more than just an alliance of convenience. He swore she was the missing piece to his restless, ambitious soul. For a fleeting, perfect moment, Amelia felt like the happiest woman in the world. But from the outset, something in Ethan's world felt rigidly controlled, meticulously orchestrated, as if the man behind the sprawling empire always needed to maintain the upper hand, even in his most personal affairs. Friends often joked that he was a chess grandmaster in business, remarkably adept at anticipating moves 5 steps ahead of his competitors. It turned out he played the same cunning, strategic game in his personal life. Though blissful at first, Amelia gradually began to find cracks in the facade of this seemingly perfect marriage. She noticed how the household staff tiptoed around Ethan, their eyes perpetually glued to the floor, as if any minor misstep would trigger dire, unspoken consequences. She saw the quick, indecipherable glances he exchanged with his chief financial officer, the suspiciously locked doors to certain home offices she was strictly forbidden to enter, and the sudden, heavy hush that fell whenever his phone rang from unknown, unlisted numbers. Then came the day that changed her life forever, the day she discovered she was pregnant. She had been overjoyed, her heart soaring with the thought of a child who would unite them more deeply, a precious chance for both of them to experience the profound beauty of unconditional love. But the moment she shared the news with Ethan, his reaction was disconcertingly muted. He offered her a stiff, formal embrace, congratulated her with a detached politeness, and then quickly excused himself to make an urgent call. That singular, chilling moment planted the first undeniable seed of doubt in Amelia's mind about whether she truly belonged in his carefully constructed, impenetrable world. What she never could have predicted, not in her wildest nightmares, was that Ethan was about to dismantle her life with the cold, calculated detachment of a man closing out a failed business deal. Their marriage might have been a union of hearts for her, a culmination of her deepest dreams, but for him, it was rapidly turning into something else entirely. A week after Amelia's positive pregnancy test, she woke up to an unsettling, profound silence. Typically, Ethan's personal chef would be bustling in the kitchen by now, the aroma of elaborate breakfasts wafting through the house. His driver, Michael, would already be waiting outside, the black SUV polished to a mirror shine, ready to whisk Ethan off to his downtown office. There would be staff scurrying around it, eating, dusting, fluffing pillows with quiet efficiency. Yet on this particular morning, the sprawling house was so eerily quiet that Amelia could hear the faint hum of the central air conditioning. Cautiously, she navigated the cold, marble-floored corridors. The luxurious home, typically buzzing with a kind of controlled, purposeful commotion, felt as vacant and sterile as an abandoned museum. She passed by the large, imposing portrait of Ethan's late mother, a renowned philanthropic icon once recognized by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The eyes in the painting seemed to follow her, their painted gaze almost pitying her palpable confusion. She reached the kitchen to find the place utterly deserted. A single, crisp note lay atop the polished granite counter. The message, written in neat, impersonal calligraphy, read, "Madam, we have been instructed to cease our duties until further notice. We wish you well." It was signed by the head butler, James, a man who had always shown her small, consistent kindnesses. Heart pounding in her chest like a trapped bird, Amelia raced to Ethan's home office, one of the few rooms that wasn't usually locked. She found it stripped of nearly everything. Only an empty desk remained where a half-dozen monitors once glowed with complex data. The shelves, which previously held thick portfolios and international business contracts, were starkly bare. All that remained was a single, sealed envelope addressed to her in a familiar, yet now ominous, script. Her hands trembled as she tore it open. The letter was from Ethan's legal counsel, not from Ethan himself. It spoke in formal, frigid language. Effective immediately, all marital obligations are suspended. Mrs. Sterling is advised to vacate the premises. Further communication will be handled through my office. She read the paragraphs again and again in stunned disbelief, struggling to reconcile the cruel meaning of these words with the man she'd called her husband. Her mind raced, desperately seeking an alternative explanation. Perhaps Ethan was in some kind of terrible trouble. Maybe he had to flee the country on urgent, undisclosed business. Or maybe, just maybe, He was trying to protect her from something dangerous. She tried to muster any scenario, however improbable, that would make sense beyond the plain, brutal meaning of those typed letters. That her husband was effectively kicking her out, pregnant and utterly alone. In a rising panic, she made calls to Ethan's personal phone, his CFO, even a main receptionist at his corporate headquarters. She was met by either an unnerving silence, disconnected lines, or vague, unhelpful responses like, "I'm sorry, but Mr. Sterling isn't available at the moment." She then found her personal belongings, clothes, cherished keepsakes, even her wedding ring neatly packed in suitcases and stacked unceremoniously near the grand entrance. Next to them lay an eviction notice, stark and official, stamped with authoritative seals. She crumpled to the floor, the cold marble a shock against her skin, a wave of disbelief washing over her. How could a man she loved, someone who had once whispered that he needed her, push her away in such a cruel, calculated, and impersonal manner? Desperation led her to dial old acquaintances, but her calls went straight to voicemail, one after another. Over the past months, she had, at Ethan's subtle but firm request, isolated herself. She'd abandoned her job, discontinued the lease on her old, modest apartment, and gradually drifted away from her friends. Even her parents were halfway around the world, temporarily residing in France to care for a sick relative. She was, in short, completely alone in a city that revered her husband as a tech luminary and philanthropic genius. With no one to turn to, no safety net to catch her fall. Soon, security guards arrived, stern-faced men she recognized from the estate's perimeter. They politely but firmly escorted her out. There was no violence, no shouting, just the sort of business-like, emotionless efficiency that had always characterized Ethan's dealings. Within minutes, Amelia stood on the sidewalk with 2 suitcases, a swelling belly, and nowhere to go. The imposing gates to the Sterling mansion closed behind her with a final, resounding click, a sound that echoed the closing of a chapter in her life. She stared at the grand facade, tears streaming down her face, uncertain of how she would survive the day, let alone care for the precious child growing inside her. In that single, devastating morning, Amelia realized she was being treated not as a wife, a partner, or even a person, but as a cast-off accessory, an inconvenience to be disposed of. Her heartbreak quickly morphed into a numb shock, then a rising tide of desperation. This was a world that worshipped Ethan's intellect and his grand philanthropic gestures. Who would even believe that he, the celebrated Ethan Sterling, would do something so vile, so utterly heartless? She glanced at her phone, full battery, yet no calls or texts from him, from anyone. She gazed at her wedding band, now ironically symbolizing unity and devotion. It felt like just a cold, meaningless piece of metal on her finger. Her mind swirled with unanswerable questions. Why had he cast her aside so brutally? Was it because of the pregnancy? Had she unwittingly sabotaged one of his grand, intricate plans simply by expecting a child? She had no illusions about the precariousness of her position. She was pregnant, homeless, and financially cut off from the man the world hailed as a billionaire savant. Still in a daze of shock, Amelia dialed the only place she could think to go, a run-down motel on the other side of the city, a place where she had once stayed briefly during a job transition years ago. She had little money, only what remained in her personal checking account, a meager sum. She flagged down a taxi and gave the driver the address. As she rode away from the opulent mansion, the tears kept rolling, fueled by a potent cocktail of confusion, fear, and a profound, soul-crushing sense of betrayal. Yet, a tiny, resilient voice inside her kept repeating, "Stay strong for your child. Stay strong." She clung to that fragile thread of determination with all her might. She might be alone for now, but she wouldn't let her unborn baby become a casualty of Ethan Sterling's inexplicable cruelty. That resolve, born of a mother's instinct, would somehow see her through what was to come, though she had no idea then just how twisted and treacherous the path ahead would become. The motel Amelia checked into was a stark, jarring contrast to the unimaginable luxury she'd just been exiled from. Peeling wallpaper, stale, smoky air, and a room barely larger than a walk-in closet. Still reeling from shock, she sat on the worn, lumpy bed, clutching her prenatal vitamins like a lifeline. Everything she believed in here, home, her marriage, her future had vanished overnight, like a cruel mirage. She forced herself to eat a peanut butter sandwich, made from a few groceries she could afford from a nearby convenience store. Each difficult bite reminded her that she had to stay strong, not just for herself, but for her unborn child. The news that night, flickering on the small, staticky television in her room, made it all worse. Ethan was on TV, smiling broadly, confidently promoting a new philanthropic tech venture. There was no mention of his pregnant wife, now trying to sleep on a lumpy mattress in a budget motel on the fringes of the city. The next day, with no support system and rapidly dwindling funds, Amelia began her desperate search for help. She remembered Eleanor Vance, a sharp, compassionate lawyer she'd met briefly at one of Ethan's many corporate events. Grasping at that faint hope, she left a trembling voicemail. "Ms. Vance, this is Amelia Hayes, Ethan Sterling's wife. Please, I need help. I have nowhere else to turn." With that single, desperate message, Amelia began to fight, not just for her own survival, but for justice. 2 days later, Amelia was finishing a cup of lukewarm tea in her cramped motel room when her phone buzzed, startling her. She nearly dropped it in her haste to answer. A cool, professional voice came through the line. "This is Eleanor Vance returning your call." "Amelia, isn't it?" Relief, so potent it was almost painful, flooded through Amelia. She briefly, haltingly, recapped her horrifying situation, trying desperately to keep her voice steady despite the tears welling in her eyes. Eleanor listened intently, only interrupting occasionally to ask clarifying questions about the timeline, the nature of the eviction, and whether Amelia had signed any prenuptial agreements. Finally, Eleanor spoke, her tone measured but firm, carrying an undercurrent of resolve. "I'd like to meet with you in person, Amelia. My office is in downtown Boston. Bring any documents you have." Amelia's finances were in dire straits, a fact she embarrassedly confessed, but Eleanor insisted that the first consultation was free of charge. Gathering her courage and her few legal papers, mainly the marriage certificate, a copy of the eviction notice, and the cold letter from Ethan's counsel, Amelia made her way downtown. The ride on public transportation took nearly an hour, weaving through the bustling city that felt so alien and hostile now, considering her recent, brutal eviction from a life of immense privilege. Eleanor's office was located in a sleek, modern building that exuded success and power. Amelia's nerves intensified as she stepped inside, worried that everyone she passed would see her as a penniless, desperate cast-off. But Eleanor Vance herself greeted Amelia in the quiet waiting area with a warm, firm handshake and a reassuring smile. She was a tall woman with sharp, intelligent features, exuding an air of unwavering confidence. Her short, cropped hair and tailored pantsuit suggested someone who thrived in the competitive corporate world, a far cry from the disheveled, frightened person Amelia felt like at that moment. In a private conference room, Eleanor laid out a crisp notepad and began to ask more detailed questions. She didn't flinch or show any surprise when Amelia described how Ethan had locked up entire sections of their house or how the staff had mysteriously vanished overnight. She jotted down notes in a decisive, methodical manner and asked pertinent follow-ups about anything that seemed unclear or particularly egregious. "What about your prenuptial agreement?" Eleanor asked, pushing her wire-rimmed glasses up her nose. "Do you recall any specific clauses about children or spousal support?" Amelia shook her head, a fresh wave of despair washing over her. "We didn't sign one. It seemed so unromantic at the time, and Ethan said he trusted me completely." Eleanor raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "No prenuptial agreement. Interesting. That can actually work in your favor." She glanced at the letter from Ethan's attorney, her expression hardening. "This is highly unusual and frankly quite cruel. He's essentially cut you off financially and you're pregnant. That's going to look terrible for him, if this goes to court. We need to move quickly. But he's so powerful, Amelia murmured, her voice trembling. He's got an entire legal team on retainer. I've got nothing. Eleanor leaned forward, her gaze direct and steady. I'll be candid with you, Amelia. This won't be easy, but I've gone up against big players before. Ethan Sterling is trying to act as if you don't exist. That's not going to fly, especially given your pregnancy. Family law tends to favor the well-being of the child. Her confidence, so calm and assured, injected a much-needed sliver of hope into Amelia's battered spirit. They discussed strategies, filing a motion for temporary spousal support, ensuring Amelia had immediate medical coverage, demanding an injunction to prevent Ethan from dissipating assets. Eleanor's voice was calm and steady, like a lighthouse beacon in a raging storm. However, Eleanor also cautioned that Ethan would almost certainly fight back and fight dirty. He might attempt to paint Amelia as an opportunist, a gold digger, or claim she'd violated some unspoken aspect of their arrangement. We should prepare for the mudslinging, Eleanor said grimly. I've seen men like Ethan do anything to protect their reputation and their fortune. Before Amelia left, Eleanor handed her a pamphlet listing supportive services for pregnant women, including a few discreet shelters that might provide better, safer accommodations than a rundown motel. Try them, she suggested gently, and keep every receipt, every text message, every bit of correspondence. We'll need it all. As Amelia walked out of the gleaming office building, a new wave of determination rolled over her. She wasn't fighting only for herself anymore. This was about her child. Eleanor Vance's willingness to stand up to a titan of industry was a lifeline she hadn't dared hope for. Her steps felt a little surer as she navigated the crowded sidewalks, heading back to the motel to gather her meager things. That night, she moved into a small women's shelter Eleanor had recommended. She shared a room with two other expectant mothers, neither of whom knew her full story, nor did they ask, offering a silent, shared understanding of hardship. The place was clean, staffed by kind volunteers and compassionate social workers with genuine concern in their eyes. Here, Amelia no longer felt hounded by the shadows of her old life, though it was still a far, far cry from the luxuries she once had. A nascent sense of community and fragile comfort began to form. She stayed up late into the night, scribbling down any details that might help her case. The secrets in the Sterling mansion, the suspicious phone calls, the staff's abrupt, coordinated departure. She recounted Ethan's strange, cold behavior after she announced her pregnancy. Everything, down to the smallest, seemingly insignificant detail, might matter. As the clock ticked past midnight, she felt a flicker of hope ignite within her. Eleanor believed in her case. Maybe, just maybe, a judge would too. But deep down, a knot of apprehension remained. She sensed that Ethan wouldn't let her off that easily. A man who built an empire by outmaneuvering everyone in the cutthroat world of business wouldn't just yield in the face of a legal fight. The stakes were about to get even higher and potentially much more dangerous. The seeds of a coming storm were planted, and Amelia braced herself for whatever chaos was about to unfold. The first court hearing took place on a brisk, gray morning. Clouds loomed heavy and dark overhead, as if reflecting Amelia's somber mood. She arrived with Eleanor by her side, gripping a binder of documents so tightly her knuckles turned white. In the hallway, a chaotic scene of reporters and photographers, she caught a glimpse of Ethan for the first time since her shocking eviction. Dressed in a bespoke suit that probably cost more than her parents' annual income, he cut an imposing, confident figure, scanning the crowd with a look of calm, almost bored indifference. Their eyes met only briefly, for a fraction of a second, and a wave of intense nausea hit Amelia. It wasn't just from her pregnancy, but from the sheer magnitude of his betrayal, seeing him there so unaffected. As the hearing commenced, Eleanor calmly and clearly outlined the basic facts. Amelia was pregnant, with no income, and had been summarily evicted from her marital home. She sought temporary spousal support and essential medical coverage. The opposing counsel, a polished, silver-haired man named Marcus Thorne, immediately argued that Amelia had voluntarily vacated the premises. He even had the audacity to claim that she had adequate financial resources of her own and, most shockingly, that the pregnancy was not conclusively verified. At that outrageous assertion, Amelia's mouth fell open in disbelief. Not conclusively verified? She had medical records, ultrasound images, everything. Eleanor, ever prepared, quickly produced irrefutable evidence of her pregnancy test results and an OBGYN's detailed report, effectively shutting down Thorne's smirking, baseless insinuation. The judge, a stern but seemingly fair woman named Judge Catherine Bell, frowned disapprovingly at Thorne's underhanded tactics and instructed both parties to focus on the substantive matter at hand. The hearing concluded with Judge Bell granting Amelia a modest monthly stipend for her living expenses until the next court date, as well as ordering Ethan's insurance to cover her prenatal care. It was a small victory, but enough to lift Amelia's spirits. "We'll build from here," Eleanor whispered reassuringly as they left the courtroom. But Amelia knew, with a chilling certainty, that the fight was far from over. Over the next few weeks, Eleanor, with the help of a newly enlisted forensic accountant, began to uncover a labyrinthine network of corporate entities and trusts behind Ethan's glittering empire. Shares were distributed among countless shell companies. Real estate holdings were veiled in offshore accounts, and assets seemed to shift daily like sand through fingers. It was a complex financial puzzle that only a skilled financial sleuth could hope to decode. Ethan was clearly trying to bury any semblance of personal wealth behind these complex legal structures, so Amelia would have little to nothing to claim. Meanwhile, the media caught wind of the hearing. Headlines emerged: philanthropic tech mogul's marital troubles, but the coverage, for the most part, remained surprisingly sympathetic to Ethan. Gossip blogs, hungry for scandal, speculated wildly that Amelia was a gold digger, cynically seeking a quick and hefty payout. Social media erupted with vicious rumors that she'd been unfaithful. Strangers hurled insults at her online, calling her manipulative or contemptuously labeling her pregnancy a trap. The relentless onslaught of negativity stung deeply, especially when she was already feeling so vulnerable and alone. Eleanor advised Amelia to stay off social media entirely. "People are going to have opinions," she said kindly, "and they'll make up stories to entertain themselves. Focus on what matters, building our legal case and taking care of your health." Despite the heavy emotional toll, Amelia pressed on. She found a part-time job typing transcripts for a small publishing company, just enough to keep herself busy and earn a little money for essentials. She spent her evenings combing through any old bank statements or financial records she could find from her time with Ethan, anything that might tie his vast personal fortune to his corporate accounts. The more she discovered, or rather, the more she recalled the opaqueness of their finances, the more her sense of betrayal grew. The entire marriage, in retrospect, felt like a carefully orchestrated sham. It wasn't just that she had lost her home. She had lost her faith in the man she believed she knew, the man she had loved. Occasionally, she'd have fleeting, bittersweet memories of tender moments with Ethan, like the time they slow danced in the moonlight on the balcony of a Tuscan villa during their brief, idyllic honeymoon, or the time he lovingly prepared her favorite dish, spinach lasagna, and teased her gently about her horrible taste in reality TV shows. These recollections haunted her dreams at night, leaving her questioning how a man capable of such genuine warmth and affection could turn so icily cold, so ruthlessly cruel. One afternoon, Eleanor invited a forensic accountant named David Chun to their meeting. David was a soft-spoken man in his early 50s, with salt and pepper hair and a remarkable knack for unraveling complex financial mysteries. He greeted Amelia politely, then opened a thick file, his demeanor serious. "We found some significant anomalies," he began, showing them charts filled with transactions that zigzagged across continents. "There are large sums moving to and from trusts in the Cayman Islands, the Isle of Man, and Luxembourg, and likely more. Sterling Industries is also funneling substantial money into partnerships that are 90% owned by Ethan Sterling himself, but are named under obscure shell entities. Amelia's stomach churned with a mixture of dread and anger. She realized that even if she won a court ruling, collecting anything from Ethan might be an enormously different and perhaps impossible matter. He was layering his assets with such intricate complexity that prying them free would be akin to scaling an endless, treacherous mountain. Eleanor, however, was undeterred. "We'll build a narrative," she told Amelia, her voice firm. "Judges hate it when wealthy spouses try to hide assets. It offends the court's fundamental sense of fairness. If we can meticulously document how Ethan is shifting money around, we'll significantly strengthen your claim." That evening, Amelia returned to the shelter, exhausted but somewhat hopeful. She had Eleanor, David, and a small, dedicated team of paralegals working tirelessly to illuminate the truth. Although the media storm raged on, Amelia was learning that public opinion ebbs and flows like the tide. The courts, at least in theory, required hard evidence, not hearsay or salacious gossip. She reminded herself, again and again, stay strong. Protect your child. Fight for justice. The legal labyrinth was complex and daunting, but she vowed not to let Ethan Sterling's empire crush her without a relentless fight. Step by painstaking step, she was inching forward, fueled by a potent mixture of steely determination and powerful maternal instinct. The next courtroom battle would be the true test of her resolve, and maybe, just maybe, the key to unraveling Ethan's carefully guarded, dark secrets. The next few weeks brought an unsettling, pervasive tension to Amelia's life. Though she continued to live at the shelter and work her part-time job, each day felt like walking through a perilous minefield. On the surface, she was coping, eating as well as she could for the baby, attending her prenatal checkups, and meeting regularly with Eleanor. But underneath, a low-grade, persistent dread shadowed her every move. She'd seen the depths of Ethan's ruthlessness, and she had no illusions that he'd remain passive while his life was scrutinized. Sure enough, the rumor mill churned faster, fueled by anonymous leaks likely originating from Ethan's camp. Speculative tabloids picked up a mysterious, damaging story. Billionaire's wife linked to former flame, accompanied by grainy, out-of-context photos of Amelia from years ago, standing beside an ex-boyfriend at a college party. The insidious piece insinuated that the child Amelia was carrying might not be Ethan's. Even more disturbing were mentions of discovered diaries, where Amelia allegedly penned elaborate fantasies of wealth and social climbing. The diaries, of course, were entirely fabricated, a cruel and desperate fiction, and Eleanor moved swiftly to issue a cease and desist letter. But the damage, in the court of public opinion where sensational headlines thrive, was done. The story gained traction, spreading like wildfire. Amelia's stress soared. She worried constantly that even if these vicious rumors were patently false, the courts might somehow be swayed by the surrounding noise, the sheer volume of negativity. Eleanor, sensing her profound fear, reassured her that real judges require credible, verifiable evidence, not tabloid gossip or manufactured scandals. But it's not just about the law. Amelia, Eleanor lamented, her expression troubled. Ethan knows how to manipulate narratives, how to play the media. We got to stay vigilant. Meanwhile, David Chun continued his meticulous dissection of Ethan's financial labyrinth. He discovered that Sterling Industries had recently launched a major philanthropic initiative, a staggering $200 million donation to a global education fund, an act publicly lauded by high-profile figures, including a renowned investor often compared to Warren Buffett. The news, conveniently timed, overshadowed the scandalous rumors about his personal life, painting Ethan once again as a benevolent, misunderstood philanthropist. Amelia recognized this for what it was, a well-timed, cynical publicity stunt, possibly orchestrated to steer public attention away from her pending lawsuit and the uncomfortable questions it raised. Still, she found allies in unexpected places. A tenacious journalist named Ben Carter from the Boston Herald approached her discreetly, claiming he had been investigating whispers of corporate malfeasance within Sterling Industries for some time. Over a tense coffee in a quiet, out-of-the-way cafe, Ben confided that rumors of insider trading and shady, aggressive mergers have been circulating for months among financial watchdogs. "I can't print anything yet, not without concrete proof," he said, sipping his coffee, his eyes sharp and observant. "But if I get something solid, I'll blow this wide open." Amelia was wary, her trust in people, especially journalists, severely eroded by the tabloids' callous treatment of her story. But Ben handed her a business card and said, "If you learn anything that ties Sterling to these alleged crimes, anything at all, call me. We both want the truth, Mrs. Hayes." She tucked the card in her pocket, unsure if she'd ever use it. However, a small part of her wondered if shining a bright, public light on Ethan's potential illegal activities might be the leverage she desperately needed in family court. Though Eleanor had warned her that going public could complicate matters significantly, especially if Ethan retaliated with even more ferocity, the possibility lingered in the back of Amelia's mind, a risky but tempting option. One morning, Eleanor invited her to a critical strategy session in the same conference room they often used. David Chun was there, as well as Eleanor's sharp paralegal, Tina. The atmosphere in the room was palpably tense. Eleanor cut straight to the chase. "We need to present a compelling case that Ethan is using fraudulent means to hide his marital assets. With the evidence David has gathered so far, we can request a subpoena for additional, highly specific financial records." David chimed in, his voice low and serious. "We'll need forensic imaging of certain computers and servers within Sterling Industries. If the court grants it, we'll have a much better chance of uncovering exactly how he's diverting funds and where." Amelia nodded, though she felt a wave of anxiety wash over her. "And then what?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Eleanor exhaled slowly. "Then we confront him in court. He either opens the books completely, or he faces serious judicial penalties. But don't forget, Amelia, he'll throw everything he has at us. His high-powered lawyers, the media, carefully crafted public opinion. This is going to be war." Despite the looming, daunting battle, Amelia felt a profound spark of gratitude for Eleanor and David's unwavering dedication. She couldn't have imagined a more committed, compassionate team. They could have easily dismissed her case, seeing it as too risky, too complex, or not lucrative enough. But something about her plight, perhaps the fundamental moral imperative to protect a pregnant woman from an unfeeling, manipulative billionaire, kept them deeply invested. Later that evening, back at the shelter, Amelia found a moment of relative peace in the common lounge area, sipping chamomile tea. A faint, gentle kick in her abdomen made her smile, a small, precious reassurance. The baby was growing stronger every day, and in a way she'd never expected. So was she. She was standing up against one of the most powerful men in the city, maybe even the world. And she was still here, still fighting, still standing. Yet a disturbing, chilling thought crept into her mind. If Ethan was capable of fabricating diaries and spinning vicious rumors to discredit her, what else could he do? What lines wouldn't he cross? The next move from his side might be even more devastating, more personal. As she lay in her narrow bed that night, listening to the rhythmic, peaceful breathing of the other women in the shelter, her mind wrestled with a single, terrifying question. How far would Ethan Sterling go to protect his empire and his reputation? And would she, and her unborn child, survive the inevitable fallout? Weeks turned into months, and Amelia's pregnancy advanced. Her belly was now visibly round, a constant, beautiful reminder of the life pulsing and growing within her. She tried to find solace and strength in each gentle flutter and kick, forging an unbreakable bond with her unborn child. Yet the grueling legal and emotional battles showed no sign of relenting. Eleanor had successfully filed a motion for a more thorough and comprehensive financial disclosure from Ethan. The court responded by scheduling a major hearing, one that could potentially force Ethan to submit highly detailed, sensitive financial records. Ethan's legal team objected vehemently, predictably claiming it was an unwarranted invasion of privacy and a baseless fishing expedition. But Judge Bell appeared increasingly unconvinced by their arguments, her patience wearing thin. The stage was meticulously set for a significant legal showdown. One evening, Eleanor called Amelia at the shelter, her voice crackling with an unusual urgency. "Amelia, you need to come to my office. Right now." David discovered something big, heart pounding with a mixture of hope and trepidation. Amelia hopped into an Uber and arrived at Eleanor's building under a dark canopy of city streetlights. She found Eleanor, David, and Tina huddled anxiously around a laptop in the conference room, their eyes locked intently on the screen. David beckoned her closer, his expression grim. "We've been sorting through some obscure corporate filings from Sterling's affiliated companies, digging really deep," he began, his voice low. "Look at this." On the screen were scanned documents, financial statements, and internal memos revealing that a specific subset of Sterling Industries, an AI research lab, had received massive, questionable funding through shell companies registered in Belize. Attached were damning email exchanges, presumably between Ethan and his CFO, discussing off-the-books transactions, thinly veiled bribes to foreign officials for favorable contracts, and a labyrinthine routing of funds designed to avoid taxes and regulatory scrutiny. Amelia's jaw dropped. "Is all of this illegal?" she whispered, her eyes wide with shock. David nodded gravely. "Potentially very illegal. It strongly suggests money laundering and bribery, all under the guise of legitimate tech investments. It's far beyond just hiding money from you, Amelia. This points to serious criminal misconduct." Eleanor frowned, her mind already racing. "We can use this as leverage. If we present this in family court, it could completely undermine his credibility and force him to comply with full asset disclosure. But we have to be extremely cautious. If we hand this over to law enforcement or the media prematurely, it could compromise your divorce case, or the evidence itself could somehow vanish." Amelia felt a sudden rush of conflicting emotions, a surge of vindication, a cold wave of fear, and an overwhelming sense of just how deep Ethan's corruption might actually go. She thought of Ben Carter, the investigative journalist, and his persistent hints about corporate wrongdoing. This explosive evidence could confirm his suspicions and blow open a massive international scandal. But was it worth the immense risk to her personal case, to her own safety? Eleanor went on, her voice measured. "If we can tie these illicit funds directly to Ethan, he'll have no choice but to negotiate, and negotiate seriously. He wouldn't want these kinds of sordid details to come out in open court, let alone in a federal criminal investigation. It might force him to settle, and settle generously." Yet Amelia's conscience flared. She wasn't just fighting a personal battle for survival anymore. Countless lives could be impacted if Sterling Industries was indeed built on a foundation of dirty money. Did she owe it to the public, to some larger sense of justice, to expose him? David tried to reassure her, his tone gentle. "Remember, Amelia, your priority right now is ensuring financial security for you and your child. But if we do go public with this, you're absolutely going to become a target. This is much bigger than just a messy divorce." Tina added softly, "We're talking about an empire that could come crashing down. And if we don't use this evidence carefully, Ethan's lawyers will claim we obtained it illegally or tampered with it. We need to dot every I and cross every T. If there's any chance these documents are admissible, we have to follow proper procedures meticulously." Amelia felt dizzy, overwhelmed. She was pregnant, essentially homeless, and battling relentless, soul-crushing rumors. And now, unbelievably, she held evidence that could potentially reveal a global scandal, bringing down a corporate titan. She grabbed a chair to steady herself, taking deep, ragged breaths. In the short term, Eleanor and David agreed to secure the explosive documents while meticulously planning the next legal steps. Meanwhile, Eleanor advised Amelia to remain exceptionally vigilant. "If Ethan finds out we have this," she warned, her eyes serious, "he'll do anything to stop us." That night, Amelia slept fitfully, if at all, disturbing images of corporate espionage and shady, backroom deals swirling in her mind. She recalled the early days of their marriage, how Ethan would spend long, secretive nights in his locked office, murmuring on phone calls in languages she didn't understand, always quick to close his laptop or shield his screen whenever she unexpectedly entered. Suddenly, all those small, odd, unsettling moments crystallized into a horrifying clarity. She'd been living alongside a man with hidden, unfathomable depths of corruption. As dawn broke, gray and uncertain, she resolved that if exposing Ethan's criminal activities could protect her child's future and bring some semblance of wider justice, she had to see it through, whatever the personal cost. The next courtroom hearing wasn't just another step in a bitter divorce proceeding. It was a lit fuse leading to a potential explosion that might consume Ethan Sterling's entire empire. And she, Amelia Hayes, held the matches. With her belly growing larger by the day, and her spirit hardened by betrayal and adversity, she prepared for a fight that could change her life, and possibly the world beyond it, forever. The day of the major court hearing dawned cool and clear, an odd, almost mocking contrast to the storm of anticipation Amelia felt raging inside. She arrived with Eleanor and David, each of them lugging boxes filled with meticulously organized documents, evidence painstakingly compiled. Outside the courthouse, a throng of reporters, photographers, and camera crews snapped photos and shouted questions, a chaotic media circus. Amelia kept her head down, her heart hammering against her ribcage like a trapped drum as she navigated past the flashing cameras and swirling microphones. Ethan appeared calm and unhurried, almost regal, flanked by his formidable legal team. He cut an almost imposing figure in a perfectly tailored midnight blue suit, responding to reporters' shouted questions with clipped, dismissive politeness, attempting to frame the case as merely a private family matter. But Amelia sensed an undercurrent of profound tension in his rigid posture, a subtle tightness around his jaw. Perhaps he suspected the bombshell Eleanor was about to drop. Judge Bell presided, her face stern and impassive as she called the proceedings to order. Eleanor began by calmly reiterating Amelia's request for full and complete financial disclosure. Thorne, Ethan's lawyer, retorted with practiced indignation that they had already provided sufficient documents, more than enough for the court's purposes. Eleanor, however, was not deterred. "We have reason to believe, Your Honor, that Ethan Sterling has substantial assets hidden in offshore accounts and through a complex web of shell corporations," Eleanor stated, her voice resonating with quiet confidence through the suddenly silent courtroom. She then produced a series of meticulously prepared exhibits, referencing suspicious wire transfers, opaque shell companies, and a disturbing pattern of what appear to be bribes and illicit payments. The tension in the room escalated palpably. Ethan's carefully maintained expression hardened, a flicker of something dark in his eyes. Thorne immediately objected, his voice loud and indignant, claiming these documents were obtained illegally, lacked proper authentication, and were nothing more than speculative slander. The judge studied the material presented, her gaze sharp, occasionally glancing at Eleanor over the rim of her glasses. Eleanor responded calmly, "Your Honor, we are prepared to authenticate these documents via a forensic accountant's sworn affidavit." David Chun rose and solemnly swore, under oath, that he had compiled the evidence using legitimate, publicly available research methods and meticulous analysis of public filings. Eleanor continued, her voice steady and unwavering. "In light of these deeply troubling revelations, we ask the court to compel Mr. Sterling to produce complete financial records, including all corporate accounts in which he holds a controlling interest, directly or indirectly." Judge Bell took a long moment to peruse the damning evidence. The gravity of the accusations money laundering, bribery, systematic asset concealment was not lost on her. She looked directly at Ethan's side. "Mr. Thorne, your client's response?" Thorne shifted uncomfortably in his expensive suit. "We vehemently dispute the authenticity of these documents and the baseless inferences Ms. Vance is attempting to draw. These are unfounded allegations designed solely to smear my client's good name. We request a postponement to allow our own forensic experts to review these materials." Eleanor shot back immediately. Meanwhile, Your Honor, my client continues to be denied rightful financial support and lives in uncertainty. We request an immediate court order for provisional access to necessary funds, given the high likelihood of Mr. Sterling's ongoing concealment of marital assets. Amelia watched Ethan's face contort ever so slightly, a tiny crack in his usually impenetrable calm facade. She'd seen that subtle look before, a dangerous mixture of suppressed anger and nascent fear. He leaned toward Thorne and whispered urgently, his words inaudible to the rest of the court. Judge Bell tapped her gavel sharply, demanding order. After a tense, rapid-fire back and forth between the legal teams, the judge made her ruling. I will order a thorough, independent audit of Mr. Sterling's finances, with full cooperation unequivocally required. Additionally, given the plausible evidence of asset concealment presented today, I am granting an increased temporary spousal support for Mrs. Sterling to ensure her well-being throughout her pregnancy. The matter of the final distribution of marital assets will be determined once this comprehensive audit is complete. The gallery erupted in hushed, excited murmurs. For Amelia, it felt like the first major, tangible victory. Official acknowledgement that Ethan might indeed be hiding significant wealth, and that she was entitled to more substantial support. Eleanor squeezed her hand reassuringly under the table, a small, triumphant smile playing on her lips. Ethan stood abruptly as the hearing adjourned, his face a mask of fury. He shot a venomous glare at Amelia across the courtroom, a glare that promised swift and severe retaliation. Thorne tried to placate him, but he brushed his lawyer aside and strode out of the courtroom, cameras flashing relentlessly in his wake. Outside, reporters swarmed Amelia and Eleanor. The mood had shifted dramatically. The scandal had become palpable, real. Eleanor gave a brief, professional statement, emphasizing that they trusted the legal system to bring the full truth to light. Amelia, trembling with a mixture of relief and residual nerves, said nothing, letting Eleanor's poised professionalism carry the moment. Once they were safely away from the media frenzy, Amelia allowed herself a small, private moment of triumph. They had forced Ethan's hand. An independent audit meant he couldn't simply bury his secrets forever. Yet, a persistent flicker of unease gnawed at her. Even cornered, Ethan Sterling was a dangerous, unpredictable opponent. She feared what he might do next, personally or professionally, to try and reclaim the upper hand, to punish her for her audacity. But for now, victory tasted sweet, especially after weeks and months of relentless anxiety and fear. Eleanor treated Amelia and David to a quiet lunch in a small, unassuming bistro. Over salads and mineral water, they exchanged cautious smiles and talked about the crucial next steps. They'd have to stand firm through the audit, respond to each inevitable legal challenge, and keep forging ahead until a final, fair settlement was reached, or until Ethan's entire web of deceit unraveled completely. Enjoy this win, Amelia, Eleanor told her gently, her eyes warm with admiration. You've earned it, but don't let your guard down. The real battle has just begun. Amelia nodded, placing a protective hand on her gently swelling belly. She felt the baby move, a reassuring flutter, a tiny beacon of hope. In that moment, she vowed never to back down for herself and for her child. Nothing and no one would break her resolve, not even a billionaire bent on vengeance. The audit took weeks of painstaking, meticulous effort. An independent team of highly skilled accountants and forensic investigators, appointed by the court, dissected Ethan's sprawling, complex empire with the precision of surgeons. They visited sterile corporate offices, sifted through mountains of digital ledgers and encrypted files, and interviewed staff members who'd once lived in constant fear of Ethan's unpredictable wrath. Slowly, painstakingly, a damning and irrefutable picture emerged. Illegal bribes paid to foreign officials, sophisticated tax evasion schemes, and blatant money laundering, all carefully orchestrated, came to light. Anonymous whistleblowers, some likely motivated by Ethan's arrogant and often cruel treatment of subordinates, came forward with additional corroborating evidence. Suddenly, the billionaire tycoon who had once been hailed as a visionary philanthropist and a titan of industry found himself the subject of a full-blown federal investigation. News outlets latched onto the unfolding scandal with voracious appetite. Ben Carter, the Boston Herald journalist, published a front-page exposé, his article filled with verified details that corroborated Eleanor and David's initial findings. The story trended on social media for days, completely overshadowing the previous, fabricated rumors that had attempted to paint Amelia as a scheming gold digger. It was now Ethan Sterling who was in the hot seat, grappling with a relentless swarm of cameras, microphones, and demands for explanations from every quarter. Sterling Industries' stock plummeted. Board members panicked, calling frantic emergency meetings in desperate attempts to salvage their own reputations and distance themselves from the unfolding disaster. Philanthropic organizations, once eager to be associated with his name, began to publicly distance themselves, returning or suspending substantial donations. Even longtime investors and business partners walked away, unwilling to be caught in the impending financial and legal meltdown. Amelia watched the chaos unfold on the news, her heart torn between a sense of profound relief and a surprising pang of sorrow. She had never intended to bring down an entire corporation, to destroy so many careers, only to protect herself and her child from further harm. Yet, it was impossible to ignore the undeniable sense of justice in the air. Ethan had spun a vast, intricate web of deceit, and now he was finally being called to account as the net inexorably closed in. As the federal investigation intensified, Ethan's once untouchable aura shattered completely. Federal agents raided Sterling Industries' corporate headquarters, seizing computers, servers, and boxes upon boxes of files. Rumors of imminent indictments circulated widely. Credible reports suggested Ethan might face years, possibly decades, in prison for a litany of charges including fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Thorne, his lawyer, tried desperately to stem the tide with increasingly hollow statements of innocence. But every day seemed to bring new, incriminating evidence to light. Meanwhile, in family court, Ethan's position had never been weaker. Judge Bell held a follow-up hearing to assess the progress of the financial audit. With the federal investigation looming large and threatening to consume everything, it was clear Ethan's empire was on the brink of total collapse. Eleanor, sensing the shift in power, requested a swift and fair resolution to Amelia's divorce, including a substantial settlement to ensure the child's future security and well-being. Thorne, now visibly attempting to negotiate from a position of extreme weakness, offered a settlement that included a lump sum payment and a trust fund for the baby. During an off-record negotiation session, Ethan himself showed up, looking haggard, disheveled, and far less composed than Amelia had ever seen him. Gone was the charismatic, confident veneer. His eyes were bloodshot, and deep lines of stress were etched permanently into his face. He glared at Amelia, saying nothing at first, his silence heavy with unspoken resentment. Then, in a subdued, almost defeated voice, he managed, "You've destroyed everything I built. Everything. Are you happy now?" Amelia felt a complex swirl of conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted to lash out, to remind him fiercely that he was the one who had callously thrown her onto the streets, pregnant and terrified. Another part, surprisingly, only felt a profound pity for a man so utterly consumed by power and greed that he'd lost his humanity, his very soul, somewhere along the way. She mustered a calm, steady response. "I only ever wanted what was fair, Ethan. Fair for me, and for our child. You made the choices that led us here, not me." Thorne cut in quickly, trying to salvage the rapidly deteriorating moment. "Let's try to keep this civil, folks." He then laid out the revised settlement terms. They included a sizable cash payment, a significant monthly stipend for Amelia, and a solemn promise to establish a well-funded, irrevocable trust in the child's name. It was more than Amelia had ever dreamed of receiving, but Eleanor, ever the sharp negotiator, sensed an opportunity to push further, given the dire circumstances Ethan faced. If Mr. Sterling truly wishes to avoid further protracted litigation and potential negative repercussions in his impending criminal court proceedings, he should agree to a significantly larger, more comprehensive settlement, Eleanor said, her voice firm and unyielding. Thorne spluttered objections, but Ethan, looking utterly deflated, simply sighed. "Fine," he muttered, his voice barely audible, a mere whisper of his former commanding tone. By the end of the intense negotiations, Amelia was set to receive a life-changing sum. The intricate details would be ironed out formally in court, but for the first time since she'd been so cruelly cast out of the mansion, she felt a profound, overwhelming sense of relief. She no longer had to fear homelessness or an uncertain, precarious future for her child. Yet, strangely, she didn't feel triumphant. Watching Ethan slump in his chair, a broken man, she realized with a startling clarity how ambition and deceit had completely corroded his soul. His downfall was undeniably tragic, even if it was in many ways deserved. This wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the dramatic, public implosion of an empire built on a foundation of lies and corruption. Eleanor reminded Amelia to keep her composure as they left the tense negotiation room. Outside, paparazzi flashed their cameras relentlessly, hungry for a glimpse of the once powerful couple now irrevocably at war. Amelia shielded her face, her thoughts turning protectively to the precious child in her womb. This bitter battle might be nearly over, but a new life, her new life, awaited a life she had to protect and nurture, far from the long, dark shadows of Ethan Sterling's fallen empire. That night, back at the shelter for what she hoped would be the last time, she gently packed her few belongings. She would soon have the resources to rent a small, safe apartment, or perhaps even buy a modest home. Tears welled in her eyes, not of sadness this time, but of profound release. For all the gut-wrenching heartbreak and paralyzing fear she had endured, she had emerged on the other side, stronger and deeply resolved to raise her child with love, unwavering honesty, and true dignity, values that money, for all its seductive power, could never, ever replace. Years passed, and Amelia's life blossomed in ways she once couldn't have imagined. The settlement, managed wisely with Eleanor's continued guidance, had provided a secure foundation. But it was her own resilient spirit that truly built her new world. She opened a small, independent bookstore cafe in a friendly, quiet neighborhood, a cozy haven filled with the comforting scent of brewing coffee and old, beloved Pajasa place where she could share her lifelong love of stories with others. It quickly became a local hub, a cherished place of community, conversation, and quiet joy. Her daughter, whom she named Lily, grew into a bright, inquisitive, and compassionate child, her happy laughter echoing through their sunlit, modest home, a stark and welcome contrast to the gilded, silent cage Amelia had once known. Lily knew nothing of the turmoil and betrayal that preceded her birth, only the unwavering, unconditional love of her mother and the genuine warmth of their life together. Amelia occasionally saw headlines about Ethan Sterling, whose empire had crumbled completely into dust, his name now synonymous with corporate greed and a stark cautionary tale whispered in business schools across the country. He was serving a lengthy prison sentence, a fallen titan whose vast riches had ultimately bought him nothing but ruin and disgrace. But Ethan's fate was a distant, fading echo in Amelia's life, no longer holding any power or emotional sway over her. She had found true, immeasurable wealth in the simple, everyday moments. Lily's small hand tucked trustingly in hers as they walked to the park, the quiet, contented hum of her bustling bookstore, the steadfast support of genuine friends she had made, and the profound, unshakable peace of a life lived authentically and on her own terms. She had even reconnected with her parents, who, after returning from France, became doting, overjoyed grandparents, their home often filled with Lily's joyful presence and boundless energy. Amelia sometimes thought back to the terrified, broken young woman she had been, cowering in that bleak motel room, and a sense of profound gratitude would wash over her. She had not only survived, she had triumphed, building a meaningful legacy of love, resilience, and integrity for her daughter. Her heart, once twisted into painful knots by an unthinkable betrayal, was now whole, beating steadily and strongly with the quiet, powerful rhythm of a life reclaimed, rebuilt, and beautifully, wonderfully remade. If Amelia's journey from despair to triumph resonated with you, and if you believe in the power of the human spirit to overcome even the most daunting challenges, please show your support. Like this story, share it with others who might find inspiration in her courage, and subscribe to our channel for more narratives of hope, resilience, and empowerment. Let's spread these powerful stories far and wide together.